All right, so you've laid the foundation with HTML, right? You've built the structure for your web pages. But let's be real. Structure without style, it's just a blueprint. In this explainer, we're going to cover that next crucial step on your developer roadmap, adding style with CSS and actually bringing your pages to life. And right now, your page probably looks something, well, a lot like this. You've got your headings, your paragraphs, your lists, all the important content is there. But, it's kind of just a plain black and white document. There's no design, no layout, definitely no personality. It's all structure, no style. So that's the big question, right? We've built the skeleton of our website, but how do we actually give it some skin? How do we start controlling the colors, the fonts, the layout, all the things that make a site feel unique and engaging? Well, the answer to all of that is CSS. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it's basically the language of presentation for the web. Its entire job is to take that structured content you wrote in HTML and tell the browser exactly how it should look. And this separation is really powerful. Think of it this way. HTML handles the what, the actual content, and CSS handles the how, the way it all looks and feels. Okay, so when it comes to applying these styles, there isn't just one way to do it. There are actually three main methods. And understanding them is kind of like going on a journey, from a quick, temporary fix all the way to the organized professional standard that you'll see on pretty much every modern website. So let's walk through them. First up, we have Inline CSS. This is the most direct way to get some style onto the page. Just look at this example. See how the style attribute is placed right inside the H1 tag itself? We're applying rules, in this case, setting the color to blue and the font size to 30 pixels, to this one single element. It's definitely fast for a quick change, but it's not a solution that scales well at all. And the trade-off here is pretty clear, right? On the plus side, yeah, inline styles are great for a quick test or a one-off tweak, but the big downside is that you're mixing your style rules directly into your HTML. This totally goes against that idea of separating concerns, and trust me, it becomes a maintenance nightmare. Just imagine trying to update a single color across hundreds of elements, one by one. Yeah, that's why this is almost never used for building real applications. Okay, method number 2 is internal CSS. This is a step up. Here, we move all the styling rules out of the HTML body and put them inside a style tag, which lives up in the document's head. Now look at this rule. We're targeting all the H1 elements on this page at once. So right away, this is a huge improvement in organization. So the big benefit here is that you can style a bunch of elements all at once, and you're keeping your styles separate from your content tags. That's great. But there's a pretty big limitation. These styles only apply to this one single page. If you have a website with multiple pages, you'd have to copy and paste this entire style block into every single file. And that's just not efficient, and it's a recipe for making mistakes. And that brings us to the third method, which is the industry best practice, external CSS. Now, look what's happening here. We have two completely separate files. The HTML file, index.html, uses a simple link tag in its head to point to an external file called styles.css. And now, all of our style rules live together in that one separate file. And believe me, this is the professional standard for a reason. First, your HTML is clean and just focused on content. Your CSS is perfectly organized in one place. But the biggest win? You can link that single styles.css file to 100 or even 1,000 different HTML pages. So, what happens when you need to change your site's main color? You just change one line of code in one file, and boom, your entire website updates instantly. That is the real power of external style sheets. Okay, so we know how to add styles, but what happens when you apply conflicting styles to the same element? Like, what if your external style sheet says a heading should be blue, but you have an internal style that says it should be red? Which one wins? This is where that first C in CSS, cascading, becomes super important. The cascade isn't some random thing. It's a very specific algorithm with a clear set of predictable rules. The browser follows this algorithm step by step to weigh all the different styles that are trying to apply to an element, and then it decides which one gets the final say. Honestly, understanding this is probably the single most important key to debugging CSS. So the browser looks at three main factors, and it looks at them in this exact order of priority. First up, it checks for a special flag called importance. If that's not in play, it moves on to calculate something called specificity. And if, after all that, there's still a tie, well, then it comes down to source order. Let's break each of these down. Let's start with source order, because it's the simplest one. If two rules are basically tied in power, the browser just applies the one it read last. You can think of it like a real cascade of water. The stuff at the bottom covers up whatever came before it. So if your style sheet says an H1 is red on line 10, but then says it's blue down on line 50, guess what? It's going to be blue. But what happens if the rules aren't equally powerful? Well, that's where specificity comes into play. The browser actually gives a score to each CSS selector based on how, well, specific it is. And a rule with a more specific selector will always win, even if it shows up earlier in the style sheet. This concept is absolutely crucial. So specificity is calculated based on a really clear hierarchy. You can see it right here in this table. An ID selector has the most weight. It's at the top because an ID is supposed to be unique on a page. Below that, you've got things like classes, and way down at the bottom are the general element selectors, like just H1. So what does this mean? It means a rule targeting an ID will always beat a rule targeting a class on the very same element. And then there's the ultimate trump card, importance. You can add this little flag, exclamation point, important, to any CSS property. And when you do that, you're basically yelling at the browser, hey, I don't care about specificity, I don't care about source order. This rule wins, period. It is without a doubt the most powerful tool in the entire Cascade. But you know what they say, with great power comes great responsibility. The official docs from the Mozilla Developer Network, MDN, give this very, very strong warning. Using important completely breaks the natural, predictable flow of the Cascade, and it can make your code incredibly difficult to debug later on. Think of it as a last resort, something you only pull out in an emergency, not a standard tool in your toolbox. One last thing that's really important to get is inheritance. Some CSS properties like color and font family just naturally flow down from a parent element to its kids. For example, if you set the text color for the main body element of your page, every paragraph and heading inside of it will automatically get that same color. They inherit it. That is, unless you give them a more specific style of their own. It's just another built-in feature that makes writing CSS so efficient. Okay, I know that was a lot to take in, but you've now got the fundamental mechanics down. You understand how CSS connects to and controls your HTML. So what's next? Where do we go from here on our roadmap? Let's quickly recap the most important points. First, always try to use external CSS. It's what keeps your projects clean, maintainable, and scalable. Second, remember the rules of the Cascade. Importance, then specificity, then source order. Seriously, when your styles aren't doing what you expect, 99% of the time, understanding that hierarchy is how you'll figure it out. So, we've spent all this time on the architecture, right? The how and the why behind connecting your styles to your HTML. You get the 3 methods and you understand the rules of the Cascade. Now, it's time to learn what to actually write. It's time to get practical. So, in our very next explainer, we're going to dive deep into the core syntax of CSS itself. We'll break down exactly what selectors, properties, and values are, and you'll get to write your very first style declarations from scratch. This is where the real design work finally begins. This is Developer Roadmaps. Map your path, build your career.